Hello and welcome to Eastern Roman history. Succession was a complicated thing in the Eastern Roman Empire. By contrast, a Western monarchy, such as Britain's, uses a system called primogeniture. In short, it means that the line of succession follows the eldest child. This provides clarity and stability to the succession of Britain's monarch. However, such a state of affairs was not the case in the Roman Empire, and therefore not in the Eastern Roman Empire. This was largely because of how the Roman emperor came into being. Augustus, in essence, inserted a monarchy into a republican system. Although members of the same family were assumed to be in line to the throne, it was not always clear whom. Suffice it to say, this was quite an open system of succession, which often led to civil wars, coups, assassinations, and bizarre turns of events on multiple occasions. One of the great problems of the 3rd century was that there was no political stability. Several emperors tried to restore this, such as Carus, who was senior emperor, Augustus as it was called, with his two sons Carinus and Numerian as Caesars, or junior emperors. The designation of Caesar gave Numerian and Carinus some authority and made it clear who were Carus's heirs. When Carus died, his two sons both became senior emperors, or Augusti. Unfortunately, this did not work because almost always these heirs never lasted very long. Numerian was found dead in 284, and Carinus was murdered by his praetorian prefect at the Battle of the Margus in 285. The Byzantine system of succession really finds its roots with Diocletian. Not only did he bring stability to the empire, but made a system of succession that actually worked, at least in theory. He made his friend Maximian senior emperor and took charge of the West in 286. Then in 293, Constantius I and Galerius were designated junior emperors and given control of areas in the West and East, respectively. This meant that a clear succession was worked out, and the death of one of the 4 emperors would mean that there were still 3 others in charge across the empire to prevent the collapse of imperial stability. This was the first smooth succession in decades without any hint of revolt or assassination. 2 new Caesars were appointed, Severus II and Maximinus II. It was only with the sudden illness and death of Constantius I that the tetrarchy, the rule of 4 that Diocletian had set up, fell back into civil war. The tetrarchy eventually failed, but many principles of the tetrarchy and the 3rd century were utilised in the centuries to come. For instance, Valentinian the Great made his brother, Valens, Emperor of the East, and his son Gratian, Caesar in the West. The principle of emperors raising their successor to the position of either senior or junior emperor before the present ruler's death continued right up until the empire's demise. For example, Manuel II raised his son John to the position of co-emperor long before the former's death in 1425. Eventually, emperors dispensed with the junior part and crowned their heirs as co-emperor, making them the same rank but often wielded little to no power, with a few exceptions. For example, Leo III's son Constantine V was crowned co-emperor in AD 719, a year after he was born. As time went on, successful chains of emperors formed dynasties. The Heraclian dynasty lasted 5 generations, and the Isaurian dynasty lasted 4. The dynasty that had the greatest success at staying in power was the Macedonian dynasty, whose 6 generations of emperors held the throne from 867 to 1056. Of course, there are instances when the throne did not pass directly from father to son. For example, Alexander, the younger brother of Leo VI, became emperor, and it was only after he died 13 months later that the throne passed to Leo's son. In addition, problems with the succession could occur. Leo VI, in his search for a son that is reminiscent of King Henry VIII's, ended up marrying 4 different women, which was illegal. His son, Constantine, was also born out of wedlock. After making a deal, Leo managed to legitimize Constantine before he died. However, while still a minor, Constantine was sidelined by Romanus I, who became the senior emperor. He also made all of his sons co-emperors as well, Christopher, Stephen, and Constantine the Capanos. Constantine VII adopted the title of Porphyrogenetos, or purpleborn, to give him more legitimacy than his usurper co-emperors. Purpleborn meant he was born in the purple chamber in the imperial palace, and Christopher, Stephen, and Constantine were not. Henceforth, everyone, including girls, that were born in the purple chamber of the imperial palace adopted the title of Porphyrogenetos, which gave them a boost to their legitimacy over potential usurpers. Sometimes succession was secured violently through a coup, murder, or a city riot. The coup of Alexius III Angelos gained him the throne from his brother, whom he blinded. Nikephoros II, Phocas, was murdered by his wife and her lover John Tzimiskes, who became the next emperor. Michael V was deposed by a city mob in Constantinople, who proclaimed the empress Theodora. On a few occasions, the throne was won through civil war, such as Andronicus III seizing the throne from his aged grandfather Andronicus II. Every so often, there was no clear choice for who would be the next emperor. When Jovian suddenly died of carbon monoxide poisoning, the court, the senate, and the army chose the soldier Valentinian to become emperor. Mutilation would also be employed to bar a person from the throne. Usually, you would execute a usurper, or, if you were a usurper, you would execute the emperor you had overthrown. However, in 641, the general Valentine began a trend of mutilating usurpers instead. He led a coup that deposed Heraclius and the Empress Martina and placed Constans II on the throne. Because Valentine could not bring himself to kill a woman or a child, which had not done anything tyrannical, he cut off Heraclius' nose and cut out Martina's tongue. This was considered more humane. The method of mutilation changed in 713 when Philippicus was blinded by Count George Burathus to disqualify him from the succession, a practice that continued to be used for the next 700 years. Sometimes emperors would take extraordinary measures to solidify their position of authority. We know that Theodore I Lascaris issued an edict in around 1208 to 1210 that commanded that all of his subjects were to take a written oath of allegiance to him and his family. The written oath of the Patriarch Michael and all of the clergy to Theodore still survives. In another such instance, when Constantine XI became emperor, his mother Helena thwarted the attempt of Demetrius Palaeologus to take the throne by rallying unanimous support in Constantinople. The army was also a factor to be considered in the succession. Many emperors came to the throne more through their military support than anything else. Julian, John VI, and Leo V are a few examples. Many usurpers were selected by their troops as well, such as Magnentius, George Maniakes, and Alexios Branas. Only 3 women held the imperial throne in their own right: Irene, Theodora, and Zoe. However, on many occasions women belonging to a dynasty could give their husband the imperium by marriage. There are many examples of this, such as Marcian, who came to the throne because he married Pulcheria. Women were often in a position to greatly influence who gained or lost the throne. The system of Roman succession was not an exact science and adapted to each specific circumstance. But from Diocletian onwards, a determined effort was made to make sure that succession within the ruling dynasty was as smooth as possible, with making the emperor's chosen successor co-emperor during their own reign being the best solution. However, considering there were over 90 emperors from Constantine I to Constantine XI, only about half of them actually became emperor through dynastic succession. If you liked this video, please do remember to like and subscribe, and this has been Eastern Roman History.